Before we get to our 10-minute speaker tonight, I'd like to give a big hand here to the Northside Events and Social Club for hosting this event. So let's give them a hand. Also, again, to Chris Reed at Creed Improvements. Remember, it's cold as hell outside now, but he's already booking those spring projects for next year. So if you don't want to miss a single cookout on a brand new deck, get a hold of him now. He's taking those appointments for spring of 2024. Also, Deanna Moray, again, let's give her a hand. She's worked with both Sarah and Kara this evening to make sure that their presentations are incredible. Also, again, Ray Mills, RM Media, and Pavithri Kilgore here working our production desk so that everything sounds good, looks good, and we really couldn't have pulled this show off without them, so give them a big hand. And so finally, now I'd like to introduce our 10-minute speaker this evening. Kara and I met in, I believe, 2018. So 2019. Okay, so over 4 years now. And I believe at that time you were just getting your business started. And it's been amazing to see the growth that her business has had over these years about being able to tell the stories of family. So let's give Kara Long with the Memory Collective a big hand.
Storytelling has been the heartbeat of family, community, and legacy since the dawn of human civilization. No matter where on earth your ancestors came from, there would have been a point in time where they sat around the fire and shared stories. And these stories would have been about skills, beliefs, lessons, and of course, who the people were that came before them. So I was introduced to oral storytelling as a kid in the most literal possible way. My dad and I would go camping, we'd make a fire, and we would sit and tell stories. Stories about beliefs, lessons, and family members. But the problem was, I couldn't remember my dad's stories later on. I remembered that stories were told and that I loved them, but not the actual contents of those stories. And I can't retell what I can't remember. And it's not just because it happened 20 plus years ago. This would have been a problem if it happened a year ago, a month ago, or even last week, because our brains just aren't wired to remember everything. And in the modern age, we're busy and distracted and disconnected, but we still make time for stories, because as humans, we love stories. We consume stories at a rate that would make our ancestors' heads spin. We've got Netflix, movies, books, podcasts, news, social media, all about heroes out there in the world doing incredible things. But not the everyday heroes in our families right in front of us. Isn't that interesting? I mean, they're the ones who mean the most to us. They're the ones who affected and influenced us the most, who we'll miss the most when they're gone. Yet, we don't seek out or prioritize their stories. And as a result, we are actively living through a silent tragedy. Countless stories, heritage, and literal loved ones have been lost to history, gone from existence, because we can't remember. I'm going through this in my own family, actually. I lost my brother when I was 12, my dad when I was 13, my Aunt Pat was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer also when I was 13, I lost my grandma when I was 17, Aunt Pat when I was 21, and my remaining 2 grandparents when I was 25. But not once did I or my family think to record their stories before they died. Not when Dad or Aunt Pat got sick, and not when my grandparents got into their 80s and 90s. So many memories of them have been lost, to say nothing of the untold stories they took with them into death. And the fragile list of what I can remember is all I really have left of them. How long do you think it takes for a live, vibrant memory of someone to turn into an old, faded photo of a stranger? It happens much faster than you'd think. For instance, I never knew my paternal grandfather. He died about 10 years before I was born. He had 5 kids, and I'm sure that they had a ton of memories together, but for whatever reason, they didn't talk about him a whole lot. Now, through them, I only know about 5 things about him, but I don't feel particularly connected to him because stories are how we connect with one another. And I don't have those. I just have a handful of facts. And how long do you think those facts can survive on their own? Especially when the next generation down is going to potentially be even less connected to him than I am. If I'm not intentional about passing down those few facts I know about my grandpa, he could cease to have existed as far as my family will remember. Within this short period of time, my own grandpa could become a photo of a stranger. And I mean, you can look at an old photo and say, well, that's just what happens. I mean, time passes and people forget and you end up with an attic full of photos of strangers. And that's definitely the situation that a lot of people are in. But it isn't because that's the truth of the nature of how life works. It's because we didn't do anything to prevent it. Now, I know some of you might be sitting here thinking like, Kara, I hear you, but there is just no way that I can memorize both of my parents and all four of my grandparents' entire life stories. I don't have time, and you're stressing me out just thinking about this. I know, and you're right. It is so much pressure to put on anyone. I mean, in my own situation, I'm thinking, if I don't find a way to memorize and repeat my family stories and somehow convince all future generations to do the same, my dad's memory dies with me. My grandparents' memories die with me. My whole family's memories will die with me. That's overwhelming. The good news is, there is a better way, and it doesn't even involve memorization. It's so easy, anyone can do it. Would you like to hear how? It's only 3 steps. So step 1 is to ask your loved one to tell their stories. Step 2 is to make a little bit of time in your busy life to listen to those stories, just once. And step 3 is while you're listening to those stories, to record them. That's it. It's like trading a couple episodes of Netflix story time for story time with your family. I know, it's a revolutionary idea. So I did this with my husband's great aunt Bev, who was 91 at the time. She's like a grandma to me, and this woman had so many incredible stories, and she told them all the time, but they were just never in any particular order and never recorded. And I thought, man, it would be a travesty if she passed before they could be recorded. So over the course of several months, I sat with her and recorded her stories, and we ended up capturing 15 and a half hours of stories from her life. I mean, that's the podcast I want to listen to, am I right? But something unexpected happened when I finished Bev's project, something I'd never experienced before. And you have to understand, I've been terrified of losing loved ones since I was 12, because it just kept happening over and over and over, and I didn't feel safe, and there was nothing safe or comforting about death. And I don't think I'm the only one in that camp. But when I finished recording Bev's stories, I felt this sense of peace and relief and hope, even knowing that she would die someday. I knew there would still be grief and loss and pain when she died, but I knew she'd never be forgotten. She would never be a photo of a stranger. Instead, she'd be remembered and beloved by every generation from this point forward. And it wouldn't even fall on me or future generations to remember her stories. All we have to do is share a link, and we can be watching stories of Bev. Bev actually died a week and a half ago. And while I am grieving and sad, but normally I'd be a mess right now. But the truth is that I'm not. For the first time, I'm not. And I have to think that it's because I recorded her stories, and anytime I want to feel connected to her, I can. Almost as if she's still here. You see, we can't bring back what's been lost, and we can't predict when that loss will take place. But by acting now, not in a few months or years, not after the dementia diagnosis or after the stroke, or when it's marginally more convenient for our busy lives, by acting now, we can prevent the continuation of this silent tragedy, this totally unnecessary post-mortem loss of our loved ones. We can make sure that we never leave our kids or grandkids wondering who we were or where they came from, or with the burden of passing on our memories from memory. We can change the paradigm of what it means to die. This isn't a distant dream. It's a wish we can grant today if we act. We just have to be willing to trade an episode of Netflix a week for story time with a loved one. I mean, that doesn't sound so bad, does it? Our elders need us right now more than ever, and this is a chance to reconnect with them, to have something to say to them every time you see them, to give them a chance to shine and feel important and heard and loved and feel like they still matter. In a world with so much disconnection, especially between generations, this is a way to bridge the gap. Imagine a future where people generations from now know our parents and grandparents just like we do, where we're more connected and appreciative of the people right in front of us and where we came from, and where death doesn't have to mean the end of connection. I hope you'll join me on my mission to protect family stories from dying with us, because together we have the power to make every story eternal. Thank you.